I really shouldn't be making videos without a voice, but I keep finding clips that I just need to respond to. So bear with me again. Promise this is the last one until I let my voice get better. Alright, I'm going to start this off by making it clear that I am a cisgender white woman. And then also to give a trigger warning, especially to any trans viewers. In this clip from Leading Britain's Conversation, they talk about J.K. Rowling, transgender rights, and then it just gets crazier. So I broke the 4-minute clip into 3 parts, and this is only half of the video. I'll have a link to the whole thing below. Let's get started.
That even if you produce sperm, you should be by law seen as a woman if you self-identify. Now, J.K. Rowling came into this and said, no, actually, I don't agree with that. J.K. Rowling said, well, if Majid identifies as a woman tomorrow, does that mean Majid can access women-only spaces? And there is a reason women-only spaces exist, and that's to protect them from men. And if you look at the statistics, not every man is a domestic abuser, but the overwhelming majority of domestic violence is conducted by men, even against other men. There are, of course, exceptions, and it's important to mention that men can also be victims of domestic abuse and violence. However, statistically, the overwhelming majority, it's true, are men who engage in violent behaviour. And so J.K. Rowling's point is that what changes if tomorrow I self-identify as a man, when you're looking at it from a safeguarding perspective, if there was a reason to safeguard people against or from men that may well behave in a certain way, then just by self-identifying as a woman tomorrow, how does that change? How does the need for safeguarding change in any way? It's a very logical point, and it's a question that does require consideration, and it has merit.
See, there's a lot to unpack there, isn't it? Where to start? I guess we should go backwards. He says it's a very logical point. No, it's not. It really isn't. He talks about the TERF that wrote Harry Potter, how her concern is women-only spaces, and that a man could identify as a woman tomorrow and then enter those spaces. And we need those spaces because domestic violence is mainly done by men. These are some really big leaps here, my guy. See, if we took it all on as one, I would be thinking that there's boyfriends and husbands out there that are claiming to be women to stalk their exes in public bathrooms and whatnot, and change rooms. That's if we paint with all of the colours they're giving us. And that sounds ridiculous, so they must be separate points, obviously. And so the domestic violence, but the key part to that is being domestic. And a big factor of that is it's usually someone known to you. You live in the same household. It's probably your partner. Please do explain to me how the transgender angle works into that. Exactly. Okay, next. The women-only spaces. See, I was brainstorming what these are, and my little list, which we could have a legitimate proper conversation about this and transgender people and segregated spaces, because on my list I have, prisons, change rooms and restrooms. Oh, and in a way to make the domestic violence issue relevant, homeless shelters. I believe they're usually men and women's. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure this comes back to that whole bathroom hysteria. Now, I could point out the whole most normal people don't like to spend that much time in public bathrooms, and most people can respect the privacy of other people, let's hope, and won't even bother talking about neutral toilets. And as a Tyler, I do have a thing or two I could say about bathrooms, but we'll leave that for another day. I want to make a quick point about how whenever you hear people bring up this, it's always a trans woman and a woman's bathroom. Why don't they ever talk about a trans man going into the men's bathroom with the same mentality of men are violent, we have to protect people? They don't do that one that much because the violence, the dangerous people in the trans men's bathroom scenario would be the cis-het men. So you see, in the hypothetical girl's bathroom, the trans person's meant to be the bad person. But in the hypothetical boy's bathroom, if we roll with the same logic, the cis people are probably going to be the attackers. So just keep that in mind whenever you hear anyone bring up the transgender public restroom discussion, because most times I've heard people talk about it, they only mention the one scenario. Alright, let's continue.
Let's strip away from that accusations and insinuations that somebody is a TERF, somebody is this, because you could say the same for Rachel Dolezal and Jessica Krug on the transracial debate. So let's strip away the ad hominem, the accusations, and try and think the topic through. The other thing I'd say before I move to the transracial debate is the following, that at the end of the day, if you accept it's a legitimate question to ask and has merit, we also have to accept that J.K. Rowling's position is not to say that she doesn't defend trans rights. Now, allow me to say my position. I have every respect and the deepest admiration for the human dignity of trans women. It's not an issue for me about recognising and appreciating our fellow human beings who are trans, men or women. The question is simply about self-identification and whether that's possible and desirable. Like me tomorrow saying I'm a woman. That's really the question, not because the law as it stands is it requires a process with 2 doctors and a couple of years, which you can see there, somebody's actually invested in the process.
Okay, well, it's a good thing that I do not accept that question has merit, so I can continue to say that J.K. Rowling does not defend trans rights. That's that. Okay, now on to something that I really wanted to talk about, something I think is really important out of what he keeps mentioning. Quote, the question is simply about self-identification and whether that is possible and desirable. Alright, well, who else would identify that you're trans? The next point on how he brings up doctors and years and that they've committed to the process. You haven't taken the time to think that this would be a long, ongoing experience that would have to start with people identifying themselves. And over time, if they choose to transition. Alright, let's do a quick recap of all the transphobia that's been mixed into this. Yeah, the whole not accepting a trans person until they've completely transitioned. There's that. And then the whole trying to put the predator badge on the trans woman, and how the commentator kept saying, if I decided to say I'm a female, considering it's something people are born with, and I would imagine depending on your personal circumstance would be various degrees of struggle, and I would imagine many people can't come out because some that do are disowned, killed, so quite offended by his phrasing and the way he was speaking about it all. Alright, we should probably get to the clip where he starts talking about transracial people.
Now, with all of that throat clearing, let's move to the transracial conversation. The same questions arise for exactly the same reasons, and I'd be hard-pressed to think of a distinction between race and sex in this regard. And therefore, the response we come with on this question needs to be, I believe, consistent. If you're saying, and it can be either way, but you have to, I think, have a logical, consistent thought process around it. But I'll tell you what I think after that too. But if you're saying if you believe a man can self-identify as a woman tomorrow in their sex, then you must also accept that a white person can self-identify as a black person or a brown person in their race. Because both, clearly race doesn't exist, sex does, but what I mean by race is what we perceive as race, which is pigmentation and melanin in the skin. So let's understand that. I know race doesn't exist scientifically. I'm talking about what we in common language refer to as race, which is basically differences in appearance of skin colour and other features. So whatever word you want to put to that, ethnicity, the real question is that can you self-identify as a different ethnicity as if you believe you can self-identify as a different sex? Either the answer should be yes for both or no for both, because to me they are perfectly analogous, with no meaningful distinction. So if you're of the view that self-identification for sex is desirable and you campaign for that change in the law, then you mustn't object to Rachel Dolezal and now Jessica Krug saying that they're black when they were white.
I'm going to break down and explain why transgender is most certainly real. Transracial most certainly is not. I've got so much I can say about this. So you can't find a distinction between race and sex. The way I see it, if you had a community where everyone's the same race, everyone looks the same, you're still going to have people with male reproductive organs, people with female reproductive organs. You're going to have all the genders, even if you just are all the same race. And to find out about another race, you have to meet if you live in a community where everybody is the same. But as for someone of the opposite gender or sex, they're going to be in that community. Parents have gender reveal parties for their newborns. They don't have race reveal parties. As I've mentioned in this video, toilets segregated by gender are still very much a big deal. Toilets segregated by race, we've meant to have moved past that. Remember? In the UK itself probably has countless transgender people, and from what I can tell, you got 2 transracial people, which seem to be white women transitioning to black, which then brings me to the other point of how if surgery and doctors are so necessary for the legitimacy of transgender people, then is that not the same standard for transracial people? Now, what sort of surgery are these ladies going to get? Are they going to get extreme skin darkening treatments, or like, for fuck's sake, if you get me a human skeleton completely decomposed, just the bones, I can tell you if it was a human female or a human male. I could not freaking tell you what race it was. No way. Could tell you if it was a male human or a female human. And I figure if you can work that out from bones, the one time there is a difference in the human's bone structure, it'll probably affect the rest of you. And goes for the rest of my point. So yeah, to respond to his final point of if you accept transgender people, you must accept transracial people. Absolutely not. You see, trans rights are human rights. Trans men and boys are men and boys, and trans women and girls are women and girls. Transracial sounds like some chicken shit racist excuse to want to do blackface. Cultural appropriation on steroids. Where is it happening in the other direction? Maybe that's what black homeowners can do when they're trying to sell their property. They could tell the real estate agent and people reprising the property, like, I identify as a white person. Please don't devalue my property. Maybe they could yell that at the cops going, I identify as Caucasian, don't shoot. So yeah, if you're trans, I would imagine you're not very impressed by this, especially if you're a trans woman. And if you're a person of colour, I would love to hear your thoughts on transracial. And yeah, so I'd be pissed off about this if I'm transgender, person of colour, non-binary. Shout out to my non-binary folk. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe.